Hello and welcome to Get the Table, a wrestling roundtable discussion podcast with myself, Adam Wilbourn, and the Dadley Boyz discussing a burning wrestling issue. But before we get into it, if you're a fan of this sort of thing, make sure you subscribe to WhatCulture Wrestling on either iTunes or Spotify for daily wrestling podcasts, where we not only review Raw and SmackDown, but also we review pay-per-views, we have roundtable discussions, we have interviews, and a roundup of the week, complete with a bloody good quiz, of course, on WrestleCulture. But gents, many times we've sat here on a Tuesday morning and lambasted WWE and moaned about a terrible product. 3 hours that really dragged on Monday night. But last night's Monday Night Raw kicked arse. It was brilliant. Arguably one of the best Monday Night Raws in a long, long time. What did you two think of it?
I skipped to work. Honestly, I was on such a high. As you pointed out, those 3 hours, especially here in the UK where it's very early in the morning and you often have to watch it on the old double speed or like try and make the decisions for yourself of what you might have to cut out of the show just to get to the meat of it. There was no filler, no fat on this show to speak of that left me with any kind of bad taste in my mouth. There was one segment which I could really pick on, and because there's only the one segment, I feel no need to pick on it. The rest of the show was so incredibly satisfying. The threads that followed throughout the show to lead to the incredible finale, which we'll all get to. Not to mention the fact that the happy real-life news at the start of the show almost created a celebratory tone that they were able to then work in to the rest of the event. Everything else was their job to make up. The start was the real bit. The rest they could have easily kind of ruined and crapped on that good news with a show that just left us feeling deflated, and they didn't. They basked in the celebratory atmosphere of it, and it was wonderful. So satisfying.
What I loved about this episode of Raw, and I'm going to get very wordplay, and I apologise in advance, is that it actually felt raw. We're talking the most overproduced, treacly, bastardization of pro wrestling under this modern sports entertainment thing. But enough of that. This was an episode of Raw that felt raw and lived up to its name, from the raw emotion of that really wonderful, of course it was wonderful, opening segment to that unhinged and dangerous climax, which for me just took everything that I hate about that show, all my complaints about how it's overproduced and so searingly fake, and just subverted everything about the way they produce angles, because what we'll get to, obviously Batista's return was just so vital and real and raw.
I want to get to that, and I want to talk about looking forward to WrestleMania, because we are, less than, 6 weeks away? That sound about right? Something like that, I think.
It's only a week and a bit till Fastlane now, and then you've got a sort of 4 or 5 week stretch.
Just under 6 weeks to go, let's say, till WrestleMania then. And a lot of the time, especially before Fastlane, we can sit here and accuse WWE of sort of spinning their wheels, of keeping the storylines going that they need to for Fastlane and keeping everything else on the back burner and not really developing everything. Obviously, we had Roman Reigns' big announcement, but it also felt like overall they had one eye on WrestleMania, which often doesn't happen at this time of year.
Well, what's funny you should say that is what you describe is very much a reality. They get the angles shot, they get the big moments out there in the ether, and then from there, it's pretty much a diminished return. But the difference this year is that beyond the Royal Rumble, which obviously set into motion the two big matches, is that it hasn't felt at all like we are in the midst of WrestleMania season. This, for me, was the inciting incident to finally crack on with some of the more different aspects of the card, because for ages it didn't feel like WrestleMania, but God almighty, it feels like WrestleMania season now. Thank God, it's took forever.
I really liked it. It instilled such a sense of purpose in so many of the characters as well. I mean, if we're going to talk about Roman Reigns, the character again, there was almost a soft launch back into his in-ring career with that beatdown with where him and Seth Rollins made the save for Dean Ambrose, and you could possibly picture them joining forces with Braun Strowman to take out Raw's 4 heels that have, up until this week, were floundering heels with absolutely no purpose on the show whatsoever. All of a sudden, they've now got to regroup and take on the Shield and Braun Strowman potentially. That's a purpose. That's at least going to get them through Fastlane and potentially spring off, say, 3 or 4 storylines off the back of that. You had, for the most part, all the baby faces succeeding in their own little battles that night, which again, I think we're probably going to have to get there, feeds into this incredible dark closing angle when the entire evening has been a story of light, a story of happy endings. Much in the same way that when Roman departed, Michael Cole's line of, not tonight, because we didn't need a sad ending that night. This was the evening where we were wrong-footed into thinking we weren't going to get one. All these incredible results and all these baby faces finally getting some vindication and a birthday party at the end. What can possibly go wrong about that? This was and I'm going to drop his name because we've spoke a lot about him recently. This was Chris Kresge level universe building, where all these characters that were feeding into a big storyline still had reasons to be in their own individual little angles.
I would just like to take this moment to apologise to Bruce Pritchard, because obviously buried him yesterday, but
first night back on the job.
Brother love. I'm so sorry, man. Like, you've come to rescue us all, and I'm so thankful. So thank you, Bruce.
I obviously want to talk about where we go from here with the likes of Ronda Rousey and Becky Lynch. But that closing segment, I think everyone assumed when they found out it was going to be Ric Flair's big 70th birthday celebration on Monday Night Raw, with Becky Lynch obviously not being involved in WrestleMania's main event as it stands, and obviously with Charlotte Flair, an association with Rick. I think everyone assumed, well, it's going to be Becky Lynch. She'll pop out of a cake and break his arm, or she'll run down to the ring. And even when she got arrested, you went, she's going to be back. But that swerve of Batista, I just want to talk about it because it's just the personification of what I want from my wrestling, I think. And shot for shot, it was perfect, wasn't it? You had all the legends coming out. You had the roster on the ramp all clapping them down, and you thought this is a nice little loving, fine, okay for Ric Flair. You know, you weren't that bothered. And it wasn't just the fact that
That's why you didn't get your invite.
One of the most partridge things you've ever said.
Yeah, because I think because I want to get to, it wasn't just the fact that you had Batista beat him down, but it was also the way that they showcased that as well.
Yeah, absolutely phenomenal. The presentation of this entire thing was just utter pitch perfect, like just absolutely wonderful. And we may never know the answer to the question, how big is Batista's dick? But this was inch perfect, if you don't mind the pun. Because what I loved about it, again, to reiterate the point, because God knows they've done enough of it over the last 10 years at least, it is such a rank, overproduced show in which nary a minute goes by without thinking, why does that character not know what that character's doing? Why is that character not acknowledging that camera? Like, it doesn't, it's relentless. Absolutely relentless. Raw is largely about how utterly phony and micromanaged and overproduced it is. The way in which Batista dragged that cameraman literally by the scruff of the neck to make this visual of what I'm doing is the most real thing you've seen in years and years and years. And he just dragged the cameraman.
The way we were made to watch that dragging.
Yeah, it was
so
like
sinister.
It was sinister, menacing, real. Just what a heel performance! I just watched it, and it was, as you said, like the Roman Reigns news. And again, we'll get to him, and it underscores what a massive story is. Because usually, before I watch the show in full, I will just go on YouTube, as Michael Hamflett said, and just go, right, okay, I'll skip Elias. He's going to get interrupted, isn't he?
WWE know that. They set their YouTube channel up accordingly, don't they?
Yeah,
They know
so
that
this is
goes
it.
on.
This is it. But I thought, no, absolutely not. I'm just going to watch the show in full because they've commanded my attention in arguably before last night a very ugly and cynical way. All sins are forgiven because it was just so beautiful a moment. I watched the entire show in full, having not watched that main event final spoiled, and my jaw was open for the entire duration. And I don't care how old Batista is, I don't care how long he's been there, and I don't care from now how often he turns up. A star is a star, and that was one of the best highlight moments of his entire career. And if you think about it, he's stolen 2019's TV already, and he stole 2018 with that promo.
Yep.
They've done two things to build this match, which previously nobody wanted. Everyone rolled their eyes at the very thought. And Batista's performance, his acting, just sold me on it completely.
We could be facetious about Bruce Pritchard. He was producing segments backstage for WWE for 20 years, and if that wasn't him, that's not to say his fingerprints weren't on it, because the very introduction of Batista dragging that cameraman was the point at which I was just similarly, as Sidgwick says, jaw dropped, absolutely captivated. But all the little visuals, all the takeaways, so we all kind of bomb into work this morning and have nothing but glowing praise for this incredible segment with Batista. But there's so much more to pick at than just his reveal and just his dragging of Ric Flair. I'm a big fan of coded colours and coded gear in pro wrestling, and I love the idea that the Ric Flair colour scheme they picked for that celebration was blue, this colour that we associate with Batista. There he is with his blue shades and his blue nose ring.
Oh.
Little clues and little things. Look, there could be happy accidents. We've talked about WWE benefiting from them as well, but why not enjoy picking apart segments that we love so much? The line, do I have your attention now, that we associate with CM Punk's fights with Triple H, fights with the system, the system that we know.
It was audacious.
Yeah, that
ballsy.
we know that Batista has had these sort of similar issues with the WWE system and the WWE machine, Vince McMahon, and how they can transpose that onto a storyline feud with Triple H to get to a match which on another day we might not exactly be that excited about.
Oh, yeah.
But all of a sudden, Triple H Batista, as it was a SmackDown last year, as Sidgwick points out, in the 2018, one of the best segments of the year, they've now twice made us feel like this could be the most exciting match on the card. And how many years do we get that with Triple H contests?
So where do we go from here looking forward to WrestleMania, looking at what happened on Monday Night Raw? Let's start with Batista and Triple H.
Can I say one more thing about this performance? Because I've been so effusive in my praise about it. I'm buzzed about it. I can't say enough good things about it. His tiny little laugh before he roared in Triple H's face was just absolutely magnificent. It wasn't oversold. It wasn't overstated. It didn't verge whatsoever on camp. It was just sinister. He couldn't help himself. He wanted to send a message to Triple H, but that was just for him. That was just for him, that little laugh. And I just thought the acting was
He's a professional actor now, isn't he?
Yeah, he's a professional actor, and you can absolutely damn well tell because it was absolute perfection. As for where that match goes, they've kind of reversed the dynamic, which again would be strange. And I could be pedantic about it if I didn't care so much about how it was pulled off because it was so good. I don't know how they arrive at the match, to be perfectly honest, but I'm in one of these positions now where I just simply couldn't care less. I just want to see it. As for the match itself, we have slack in this office. And we were talking about it because that's all we've been able to talk about all morning was how dynamite this angle was. And a few cynical whispers crept in from various corners of the office, and it's saying, well, it's all well and good pulling off this amazing storyline, but when Batista's in-ring conditioning and Triple H's arrogance gets exposed in like a 25 to 30-minute match, like we're going to look like idiots for being excited about this. But I don't think that's where this is going. And I've got the trust. We talked about this on the podcast yesterday. I've got so much trust about where we're going from here. Like, I can't imagine Triple H so fresh off like a really brutal injury that only John Cena has ever recovered in a similar time frame to what we assume Triple H has recovered from. The fact that Batista was very much gassed after running for about 5 seconds, I've just got this feeling, and I think it's the trust they've built over the course of these two angles, that we're going to get like a 14 to 15 minute WrestleMania 23-esque mini banger in which they just smoke and mirrors the whole thing with like table wreckages and big power moves, like a boxing match, but in a pro wrestling ring. I just got the faith now that that's where they're going to go.
Triple H knows how those matches with The Undertaker in October, November last year were received as well, the Australia one and the Saudi Arabia one. I know it's Triple H.
WrestleMania 25.
I know
you should have learned his lesson then.
He's the rule-proven exception. But I think he knows this time around. Again, as you say, we don't want to be kind of fooled and held to these comments now and then laughed at after WrestleMania. But I'd rather go into this full of optimism that, they're just, both of them are going to realise and learn from the mistakes they've made in previous occasions. Batista especially, I don't think after all the to and froing that we've seen between Batista and WWE over the years, he's going to want to come back to feel embarrassed or disappointed. There's a lot of wrongs to be righted from that 2014 run, and that can be done pretty much in one night at WrestleMania off the back of 2 or 3 incredibly powerful segments like these. We'll
get to Roman Reigns in a second, but I feel we need to also develop what is going to be the main event of WrestleMania. An intriguing development on Monday Night Raw with obviously Becky Lynch getting involved in the tag match, and then the subsequent fallout with Ronda Rousey and Stephanie McMahon. What did you think of it all?
Thought it was a very interesting development, which I can't predict going forward, which makes sense from a character perspective because it's been foreshadowed that Ronda Rousey, for all of her personal grievances with Becky Lynch, really wants to progress this women's division. That's why she's came. She wants to emulate a success in that regard with UFC, with WWE. This makes sense from a character perspective and feeds into the drama and the unpredictable nature of the storyline. I just thought everything on the show, bar, as Hamflet says, we got the exact same complaints, which we might address, we might not, who knows.
We were discussing this morning the fact that they've managed to convince the crowd, who relentlessly booed even to the suggestion of Charlotte Flair being involved in the match. Last night they were chanting triple threat.
I think that's immaculate writing. I think that's everything that Vince McMahon used to be excellent with that. It's fine for him to be the ideas guy. His job is to sell you his ideas, and that's what he's managed to do. We've talked about this before, this is the most organic triple threat in company history, and I love and completely believe Ronda Rousey's motivation that A, she just really wants to get her hands on Becky Lynch. She's somebody chasing redemption that she's not yet got, but B, she understands the level of her star aura and what she's brought to this division and how she can elevate it. The idea that she was just screaming screaming for Vince and got Stephanie. Stephanie rarely presents herself as a second prize and did. Ronda's line, "I am not your worker."
I've been waiting for that line.
What a
For
line that
6
was.
years.
What
5
a
and a
line
half
that
years. She
was.
came back, just after SummerSlam 2013?
Yeah. something like that.
Emasculated absolutely everyone, presented herself as this domineering authority figure to whom everyone is beneath. I've been waiting 5.5 long years for someone to say that, and for Ronda to do it. I didn't care that she flubbed the promo as she often does, because that line was just perfect.
That shot of Stephanie McMahon holding the belt backstage with Triple H and not really knowing what to do next was just Ronda flushing this power, this oppressive power that we as viewers feel, let alone the wrestlers have to wrestle underneath them. I don't care now if that belt is vacated or Vince McMahon just tries to give it to Charlotte and says, well,
that would be top.
We'll do Charlotte versus Ruby Riott then. You can both forget about it or something like that. And then you've got the situation where, let's say, Becky can win a vacant title and then you're set for backlash because it's, well, Ronda saying, well, not only did you not beat me for the title, but I'm an unbeaten champion. Ronda's not had to lose to potentially lose that belt. However they spin off this now, we've still got the triple threat. We've still got the rematches and we've still got the payoff. This was some of the best creative writing without at least taking another Becky Lynch shortcut. We said after that incredible Tyson Austin-esque promo the night after the Rumble where Ronda and Becky finally came face to face, we said, I wish we could have the match right now. And they've not put a barrier up. They've put more adventures and more things for us to get excited about on the way to WrestleMania, and they're not very good at this now.
I know, how many times have they had a match that you were like, I can't wait for that, for a big full pay-per-view in 2 months' time, and by the time it rolls around, you're like, oh, I'm not really bothered anymore. Now it's just building and building this excitement for not only the showdown, which we've been anticipating since Survivor Series, but now this triple threat with so many different possible permutations.
Yeah, absolutely. As an angle, this just has undermined 2.5 years of my work by saying that this company is creatively bankrupt and they don't know what they're doing. They completely shoved 2 middle fingers in my face and told me to go F myself, because on this night they proved, and I don't know at this point whether it's the old broken clock metaphor, and it probably is. It's going to be terrible in May, let's face it. Let's just get used to that idea now. But again, like, I don't mind being wrong. I want to like this thing. Like, we don't often cover New Japan Pro Wrestling on the site because it doesn't really do that well, and we all want to stay in full-time employment. You can't really be indulgent about this sort of thing. I would rather look like an idiot and have to go and say, you know what, WWE knocked 8 out of the park last night with a dynamite show that I can love and use to look forward to the biggest show of the year, than be proved wrong. Like, prove me wrong more often. I would love that.
Roman said it, didn't he? He said he hit a home run. And then there it was. There was the invitation for the rest of the show to do exactly the same, and they did it.
Before we get to Roman, very quickly, we should arguably discuss the lesser points of
We're doing
Monday
a bit
Night Raw.
WWE here, aren't we? Because people want to hear about Roman Reigns and our takes on it. And much like the Thursday to Monday announcements, like, no, we're going to make you wait.
Stick around.
So we can't criticise that anymore either.
Come in later,
You're absolutely
Roman
ruining my
Reigns.
job. You're ruining my job.
Just after the break, we'll discuss that. But before we should cover things that people arguably may say were low points of the show. The Revival lost again to Aleister Black and Ricochet. It's for a second week running. I went into a match going, this is going to be fantastic, but how on earth does anyone come out of this look? Well, how does it on earth does everyone, i.e., 2 of your most recent NXT call-ups who are phenomenal and your newly crowned Raw Tag Team Champions, how do they come out like that looking good? And they don't. The Revival don't. But arguably, the damage has already been done to the Revival.
I would say so.
Yeah, the ends justified the means to me this week.
See, I don't know. I'm a very stubborn and pedantic man, and when you see something like this malignant kind of book, and it just really, really upsets us because it's just rank storytelling, isn't it? It's how do you get from plot point A to B in the quickest and most destructive fashion ever? Right? How does a challenging team get a match against the champions? Just beat them. It's just rubbish. We've seen it for years and years and years. It is rubbish. Extenuating circumstances might be behind it. The match itself wasn't enough of a banger for me to really care, even though the Revival's work was very cheeky, and I'm a big fan of management getting defied. It was rank storytelling, this. On a really good show, this was like very much a blemish.
This again could be me giving them a free pass because I was so positive about so much else on the show. But I did like how this week was almost a bit of a make good from Vince to Triple H. Like, right, I'm sorry I broke all your toys last week. Can we try and glue them back together? Like, now in NXT, they've been forced.
The Revival are his toys as well.
Yeah, they've been forced brilliantly to have to rebook around these call-ups, and we've seen Aleister Black and Ricochet put together in a team in the Dusty Rhodes Tag Invitational Classic, whatever it's called. So they've been established on Raw as this tag force, which might not stick around. They might not beat the Revival for the tag belts, but we can now receive them on both shows as a fairly unified force until they're both called up proper after WrestleMania, most likely as single stars. And I quite like that. I admire them trying to make good on what happened last week. I can personally cope with the Revival laying down. I've seen a lot of criticism on that today, but this is one of those occasions where I feel like WWE's broken system allows for burials like this because we've seen characters fixed after 2 or 3 weeks. They've at least got the belts, and the Revival are good enough in the matches to make good on, say, a rematch in a couple of weeks' time, where all of a sudden you care about Dash and Dawson all over again. That is a benefit.
We said this about Asuka in December and January, and look where she is now. So I have to disagree with that take.
Any other issues you had Monday Night Raw?
Yes.
Only the lingering one about Alexa Bliss and a moment of bliss.
Yeah.
It's uncomfortable for all the obvious reasons, and I think that's what's so disappointing. A woman shouldn't be getting sexualized on WWE television in 2019, full stop. I think we can all agree with that. Not least...
Well, the comment section won't.
not least a performer in Alexa Bliss who may not be amongst the elite in terms of in-ring, but was one of the most pushed and most profiled and thus most over talents that they've had since the 2015 Women's Revolution. So we've talked about her as a potential opponent for Asuka. She's a character that you ask what she's going to be doing at the major pay-per-views, and they're reducing her to being a flirty talk show host that doesn't particularly seem to have discerning taste in one character or another. She's done this with Finn Balor. She's done this with EC3.
She's got a type.
What?
Hunks. Muscle-bound hunks.
And, well, yeah.
Well, always comes out. She's not perfect on him, is she?
There's less of them
quite the
than usually, I suppose. But yeah, it's disappointing, I think, to see Alexa Bliss cast like that, as it would be any of the females currently on the roster, but especially somebody like Alexa Bliss.
It wasn't just the portrayal of Alexa Bliss in this segment which annoyed me to high heaven. And again, there's only 2 things on the show which annoyed us, but I want to re-emphasize the point that it was just so outstanding. I want Finn Balor to turn heel, and I want him to turn heel yesterday because his babyface promo game is just rotten.
I
was just about to get at that. It was absolutely awful in conception and delivery. And the reason why I want him to turn heel, and I'm going to put my little stupid daft New Japan hat on, if you just indulge me for 1 minute, the guy as Prince Devitt wasn't just a fantastic heel, he was a borderline revolutionary heel. He was so good in that role. And again, he subverted the whole idea of that you're meant to be an extension of your real life personality, because Finn Balor, as we know, is very sound, all round well liked, and a very progressive dude, but he is just a far better heel than he is a babyface, and his performance was just awful.
He wanted to take her to a cracking owl sanctuary, didn't he? That noise was cringeworthy, out of your body.
Right, let's get to the point that most people have been waiting for now. Lacey Evans. No. Roman Reigns. What did you think of all this? And what can you see in his future? Because a lot of people are arguably getting a bit ahead of themselves and booking him into angles and saying, why isn't he back in the main event picture? He's only just recovered at the end of the day from leukemia. He's in remission, yes. But what do you see in his future?
Well, in the short term, I think he's perfect to be brought back in with a very limited role. I think if we are looking at a quick Shield reunion, or a Shield and Strowman against the Raw Dorks, whoever, like, he's only there for a hot tag and a few Superman punches.
So many accidental partridges on this show. They're
called the Meat Shield. We've all agreed on this.
4 Dorksmen. Like, it's just, I think he now, more than ever, can actually be that Roman Reigns for a couple of months. He doesn't need an enormous WrestleMania program because the pop he's going to get is going to be enormous. He's going to be received.
Arguably not in the condition for a feature singles either.
Yeah, so like for a change, like less is going to be more from Roman Reigns, and I think that's an ideal way to sort of reintroduce him back into the storylines before he becomes normalized and before he becomes a little bit ordinary again. The opening promo, I mean, you know, as WWE commentators will tell you, yeah, it's something that we can all relate to, and it's, you know, it's full of pathos because you want to see a character prevail in storyline terms, but this is so much more. And Roman Reigns is the Raw I compared it to. It's, you know, coming from England, we're obviously very sort of attuned to football results and football like relationships with football clubs. Roman Reigns has been this guy that has been the team that everybody hated the most. And that second pop, when he just uttered those words, in remission, it wasn't like your team scoring the winner. It was like your team scoring the second late on to confirm that what you thought was going to happen was over the line. It wasn't just satisfaction, it was relief. It was all the positive emotions all at once balled up from this nervous energy that the fans were just waiting to unleash. And I think WWE knew that, and I think they played with that. And as we've talked about on other podcasts, they were really walking a tightrope that if he wasn't delivering the best news, or God forbid the very worst, then this was a pretty ugly bit of promotion on their part to say that he was coming to Raw.
I mean, for me, it still kind of was, but carry on.
It's not ideal, but I think they just about got it right for me. I'm not so convinced about the mail shots that came out immediately after the segment saying buy the shirt, unless I know that some of those proceeds are going to various charities. But ultimately, I think what you had, it stayed real life enough. It didn't actually get that pro wrestling. I think that would have been the problem. Later on, when we saw him come out with Seth Rollins, that was almost divorced from the opening segment. The opening segment was as real as it got, and you just sensed he was instructed to go out there and do and say as he wished, and it was kept as far away from a wrestling promo as possible.
Yeah, I've got two takes on the Roman Reigns stuff. Obviously, the first is that it's just such a relief and such a heartwarming moment, especially for that company. I mean, it was just absolutely incredible. And again, like the fact that this guy has overcame something like that, just the word is pathos, as you say. Like, I watched it and I was conflicted because I've always been a supporter of Roman Reigns. You can honestly go back on so many of my articles and you will see that I love the performer, and I always thought the idea was that it was what he symbolised more than what the man was, that people were alienated from him. And the mere fact that he's overcame this made me think, like, should I really be critical of so many wrestlers when we don't know what they go through and how just the warriors that they are in that ring? Like, should I really be like burying Baron Corbin that often? And then he comes on, I'm like, yeah, probably should. Probably should. But as for WrestleMania, which I honestly can't wait to see that man back in a ring just because he has earned it. Like, we were watching the WrestleMania 24 special from WrestleMania 34, and Roman Reigns getting his head stapled back together after risking a concussion to get over as a babyface in a match he lost, was getting treated backstage, and in a really stark moment just said, I just hope people know that I'm trying my hardest.
With his son hanging off his arm.
With his son hanging off his arm. I'm trying my hardest here, and it just made me well up. And I'm not afraid to admit that. So I really want to see Roman Reigns do something euphoric at WrestleMania. And just one last thing as well. I've in pockets, WWE is going for criticism over like really sudden and like tonally dissonant like plot developments they've done in recent months. The retconned Dean Ambrose heel turn, he just became babyface overnight, and the triple powerbomb spot at Elimination Chamber. Both those things happening individually made me think, like, what on earth are you going A for that cheap heat for, and B for that inconsistent character portrayal? But now we know. So WWE does know what they're doing, and maybe on the back of those moments and on the back of his spectacular episode of Raw, we should maybe trust them a bit more until next week.
This isn't going to sound all that attractive on paper, but as you say, like an explosive, euphoric squash, I could honestly see something like Roman Reigns and Baron Corbin going a minute at WrestleMania. An absolutely definitive squash of this character that is universally despised by a man that is now universally loved, with nothing more than a Superman punch and a spear. I don't think that would be the worst use of Roman Reigns at WrestleMania, nor this awful Baron Corbin character, for that matter, especially if he dodges the pin when they have whatever this tag match is likely to be.
A truly exciting time to be a WWE fan. A great Monday Night Raw to enjoy. And just nice to be positive, I suppose.
It's the best. It's the best feeling to love.
I want to have this more often. Yeah, like I do.
It's not our fault we're so negative.
It's theirs.
It's theirs.
Don't blame Lafayette. Don't blame WhatCulture Wrestling.
Don't hate the players.
Hate the game.
Let us know your thoughts on all of this in the comments section below. You can let us know on Twitter at WhatCultureWWE. Well, actually, they can follow all three of us. You can follow Michael Hamflett at
Michael Hamflett.
Follow Michael Sidgwick at
Bruce Pitchard, I'm so sorry, mate. M. Sidgwick.
You can follow me at Adam Wilbourn. As I said, make sure you subscribe to WhatCulture Wrestling on either iTunes or Spotify for daily wrestling podcasts. My thanks to the Dadley Boyz. Thank you for watching, and we will see you soon.